everyone. It's David Treleaven. I'm recording this video as a little intro to the session that you're about to watch on internal family systems and trauma-sensitive mindfulness. We just finished it about a half an hour ago. It went great. If you're watching this, thanks for being here. I've been wanting to do this session for many years. It was super exciting to be doing it live. We had over 450 people come, which was exciting and brought up some parts around, wanting it to go well. And Govinda and I did our best to try to convey some of the high-level principles of internal family systems while also giving you a lot of practice time. So you'll see that in this session. We also had some time for Q&A. We talked a little bit about a course offering that we're doing, but really we wanted this just to be its own thing, kind of a complete offer. If you want to go deeper, that's awesome. But really it was just a way to talk about, I think, these amazing intersections between IFS and TSM. So thanks for being here. Enjoy the session and see you soon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on internal family systems and trauma-sensitive mindfulness. We made it. We did it. I've been wanting to do this for honestly like 3 or 4 years, and I'm thrilled to have this time with you. Thanks for being here live. It means a lot. We know some people will be watching the recording as well. But this is a chance for us to come together around what feels like a really important topic. Govinda and I were just talking beforehand about this feeling timely, a particular moment to come together and talk about just how to be great practitioners in whatever role we're in. And the whole purpose of this webinar is really just to empower you. We want to explore the very particular relationship between internal family systems and trauma-sensitive mindfulness. We want to leave you with some tools, but really we want to get into the conversation, just wade into it, because I think there's so much incredible overlap between these two systems. I know a lot of you, I'm in touch with some of you. You've been interested in IFS. You might be an IFS practitioner. I can't believe the amount of overlap. And I've found it to be one of the most useful frameworks for just me as a human, including me as, therapist, coach, teacher. Even doing this morning, I was like, I was in some parts I wanted to go well. And I found this framework to be so helpful to be in a skillful relationship with myself in a way that makes me more effective, I think, in my life as a friend, as a partner. And so that's the idea here, is really to empower you in whatever role that you're in. And also, we just want this to be a good use of your time. So we're going to be talking some. We definitely have some theory we want to unpack and frame it all, but really we want to put you in practice so that you can be feeling what we're up to here in terms of IFS, especially if IFS is newer for you. But I think a lot of you will have heard about it. You're probably thinking about, like, how does it relate to trauma? How does it relate to trauma-informed practice? So I'm really, really excited to be here with you all. Thank you. So I'm here with my friend and long-term colleague, Govinda Bader. Govinda, he's awesome. He's one of the best IFS therapists I know. Really, he's one of the first people that I heard the model from maybe like 10, 12 years ago. And when I have questions about IFS, I go to him. When he teaches, he gets really lit up around it. And so we've had all these conversations over the years where I've been asking him, I'm like, this would be really good if you want to come and talk to, like, my community here about IFS, what you think about it. And I just think he's an amazing teacher. He's also a great cook. He makes really good chicken. So yeah, I invited him here. Govinda, do you want to jump in and say hi here?
Yeah, thanks, David. Great to see you and great to be with you all. My name is Govinda Bader. I'm a psychotherapist in the San Francisco Bay Area. Um, I've been using the IFS model since 2011, and I was on the staff for the IFS Institute, the training staff, from 2013 to 2017. And I've taught a bunch of IFS workshops around counseling centers in the Bay Area. And yeah, as David said, IFS is just a passion of mine. I love it as a therapeutic tool. I'm a psychotherapist. But as David mentioned, I also just find it useful as a human being to understand my inner world, to be able to work with my inner world, to be able to understand friends, partners, why people do things that they do. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here with you and share my passion for IFS with this community.
Great. Thanks, Govinda. So here's how we're planning to roll. Is this we'll be here for, we scheduled an hour, but we don't know how long this will go. It could be 45, 50 minutes. We'll see how this goes. We want to talk for a bit, as I mentioned, then we want to put you in practice, and we'll be here. We'll guide you through different practices. I have one, Govinda has one. There'll also be time for Q&A. So in terms of questions, if you have them, please chat them into the main chat. I'm not watching it right now, but Govinda, when he's leading, I'll come to it. And so if you have questions, you can chat me directly. You can also chat the whole group here. And we should have 5 to 10 minutes to talk about just what are you thinking about, thoughts, questions, etc. This is recorded, and there's a lot of people who wanted to see it in community. So just know that if you come on, we might invite you on for question and answer, in which case just know that I'll be sending it out to the group, so you'd be recorded. This is not meant to be a therapy training. This is a therapeutic model. And I think there's huge implications for what it means in trauma-sensitive practice. And just know, this is not the intention to train you to be a therapist here. And video on is great. We love seeing you. And you're always in choice around the video. So why don't we start with a brief practice to help land here. So you can take a minute and settle in. And just invite you to take a couple of deeper breaths here as we begin. Wherever you are in your day, I know some people it's morning, others in the evening. And as you do this, you could find some touch points with the ground, perhaps the buttocks in the chair, feet on the ground, and just giving yourself a few moments here to arrive. Finding the pace and the depth of the breath that feels supportive for you and your presence right now. And taking a moment just to notice what's here, how you're arriving to the session right now. You could check in with your mood, any sensations that are present, temperature, pressure, any narratives that are here, whether you're coming in with kind of a busier mind or if there's more spaciousness. And seeing if whatever you find, there can be just some agreement. It's like a recognition. Okay, that's what's here. No need to change it. Just that power over and over again. This is what's happening. And then final part of the practice here, just invite you to bring to mind and or heart, what was your inspiration for coming to this session, live or watching this online? What lights you up or what inspires you about this topic? And is there anyone in particular that this feels like it would be in service of? It could be for you personally, could be for people in your circles or people that you teach and serve. And just bringing them also into mind and heart here for a moment. Knowing this is in service of yourself and them as well. Great. And then in the next few breaths, you can begin to shift out of this practice. You can take a couple deeper breaths, maybe a little movement, whatever will support the end here. And we'll shift, we'll transition. I'll put a little shout out here that I've been trying to find a bell that works. I don't know if you've found this, that I'll ring the bell and people won't hear it when you're on Zoom. So if anyone's figured this out, or you can put it in the chat, I'm trying to figure out how to bring people back. And I'm still stuck on that. So anyway. Okay. So let me say a couple things, then Govinda's going to say a couple things, then we'll practice. I'm so excited that we're here talking about this. This is such an alive topic for me. And the whole webinar is trying to connect the dots between trauma-sensitive mindfulness and internal family systems. Where do they complement? How do they go together? I came to it mostly through friends and colleagues. I actually wrote about it in my book that came out 5.5 years ago now. I did a little section on it. And I said, IFS is awesome. Govinda actually like helped me with this section of the chapter. And so I've been thinking about it for a long time. And honestly, the first time I got really clued into it was when I was staying with some friends who were both IFS people, and they got into a fight, which we just like, I've known them for a long time. I take it as a compliment that they could get into a fight in front of me. And they had had a long day. They had a 3-year-old at the time. We were having dinner, and I was like, oh boy, they're getting into it here. They're having a fight. And it escalated. And at some point, one of the partners said, a part of me is so frustrated right now. Part of me is really mad. And I noticed that what happened in that moment is there's just a lot of space. It was like, okay, there's a part of him mad. He wasn't like, I'm pissed at you. He said, a part of me is mad. And then the other person could say, there's a part of me that feels totally ashamed and wants to run away. So they ended up having this conversation, which I had never, I'm in couples therapy, both as a client, and I've held some where it opened this space that I had never really felt. And I talked to them later about it. And what they said is that their commitment to each other in terms of IFS, Govinda was mentioning this, is that they would speak for a part versus from it. We'll talk more about parts, but the idea here is I'm going to advocate for a part of me. I'm going to speak for it, but I'm not just going to be from it and blended and merged. We'll talk more about that. And I'm pissed. And that to me is mindfulness. This ability to just get a little bit of distance from our experience and what happens around that, like the possibilities that opens. So that's what opened up for me. I started doing some IFS sessions. I found it super helpful. And I found it for me as a teacher who is shaped in certain ways about wanting to please. And I really get to work with parts that want, everyone to be happy. This has to go perfect. We all have different parts that we're working. And so part of why we wanted to get into this is it's a map for both how you can think about trauma, which we'll talk about, but it's also really a map for yourself. And so much of the TSM work is about how can we be embodied as practitioners? If you've come through any training with me or done the free webinars, there's the whole list of trauma-informed practices, which are awesome. There's hundreds of best practices. And then there's how we're being. There's our embodiment. And I'd say that the people who I know who have been doing IFS work seem to be just really powerful embodied teachers. And it's compelling to me. So that's why we wanted to bring it in, is to talk to you about how this can work in TSM and in your lives. Last point, and then Govinda, I'll open up with you. Some of you will have heard this distinction in TSM about, which is trauma-sensitive mindfulness, if that's the acronym, is this difference between being with and working with. This is a really key part of TSM. Being with is really mindfulness, our ability to for ourselves and others, help people be with their experience without trying to change it. That was the opening meditation. That to me is so radical. We are helping people just be with and not try to change their experience. And the headline here, as you likely know, is someone struggling with trauma or dysregulated arousal, nervous system that's out of balance. They'll often need more tools than simply being with. Being with is helpful, but also we need some tools about working with. That's a big part of TSM. Okay, what would you bring in to help someone be with their experience when they can't, when they're overwhelmed? I've gotten stuck over the years around, okay, well, if I'm being with myself, my life, this moment, what are the tools that I have to actually work with beyond just kind of bare mindful awareness of parts that come up? Like when I'm feeling stirred, triggered, nervous, anxious, whatever's going on, do I just bring basic mindfulness to it? Or if I'm to engage, how would I do it beyond labeling? Like labeling, I think, is super helpful in the mindfulness world. But then there's this relational component of getting in with ourselves. And this is where the IFS map made so much sense. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the map to actually how to do that. So that's why, again, we're just trying to build some context of why we wanted to do this. But I've been talking for a while. Govinda, okay, so I'll just to be transparent with all of you, we were going to plan this and sketch it out, and then we just decided I just want to interview Govinda as I often do. So I'm going to ask him some questions, and we're just going to go live. So, Govinda, what do you want to talk about? And here's the first question I had is, why do you think in your chair around IFS, why would this be useful for this particular community? Because you've heard me talk about this community a lot. So why do you think IFS is useful around TSM work?
Great. Uh, the map of parts is so fundamental to what IFS is about. So just understanding the different internal relationships between parts. Um, we have protective parts, we have vulnerable parts, and then we also have a self. In IFS, we have a self with a capital S to basically to signify it's a place of resource inside of ourselves. So that's really the basic map of the model. And it's quite simple, but there's really a lot to it. The techniques that we use in psychotherapy can also be applied to just your average layperson. Some of the tools for how to actually access the self. You actually mentioned one in your example of the couple who was fighting. I think I know who that couple is, by the way. Uh, they spoke four parts of themselves. And what that does is it opens space for that self to be more present. And self is contagious. When one person is in self in a relationship, whether that's partners or as a practitioner, you can feel it. The other person can actually sense when you have self, or what we call self energy sometimes in the IFS community. So, how do you get there though? How do you access self? We have really clear tools and techniques that we can borrow from the IFS model. And some of you, just depending on your scope of practice, can use them in different ways with your students and your clients. So it's a map, a clear map for understanding, vulnerabilities that come up, protection that comes up, and then how to actually find the resource of self to bring into connection with the different parts that show up. So, fundamental to the model is multiplicity. Um, Basically, we have multiple parts of ourselves inside as a natural phenomenon as human beings. That's not pathological. People have talked about multiple personality disorder or what's now called dissociative identity disorder. And it's really a non-pathological phenomenon that we have multiple voices and points of view inside. Like, part of me says, go to the gym this morning, and another part of me says, like, no, I'm going to sit around and like watch YouTube videos. This competing points of view inside is just a natural, inherent thing. You've seen it depicted in the Inside Out movies quite well. And then people just speak naturally about their experience using parts language. Part of me, wants to leave my partner. Another part of me is scared I'll be alone forever if I do that. So it's already quite a well-known way of speaking about your experience. And then as a practitioner, it's also quite user-friendly in naming the phenomenon that come up in mindfulness or in coaching or therapy in different therapeutic settings. So yeah, basically, I think it's just a great way to understand the human experience on the inner world and then have great tools and techniques for how to help someone navigate when they're stuck.
Govinda, can you talk about this? Is great. Can you talk about trauma? This is a conversation we've been in. Like what's happening in the mob makes sense to me, self parts. What's happening around trauma? Is it different? Anyway, could you talk about it with trauma? How
Yeah. Sure. So the systems part of internal family systems really gives clarity to when a trauma response is happening. Usually you have a couple of different parts firing at the same time. So some sort of activation or overwhelm might get triggered, and then protection will almost always show up at the same time. So um, the model gives a way to understand like what those different parts are, whether they are, like young inner children, as some models look at them, or defenses. Some people use that term. We just call them protective parts. So in trauma, basically, you have pain from the past getting accessed in the present moment, which is bringing up some kind of vulnerability, some kind of protection, and then often both. So then the question is, well, what do you do? And in psychotherapy, we have a way of working with it. And then some of the tools we can lend from psychotherapy to TSM practitioners just to help them, have a clear understanding of what's happening.
can you talk about how do you know if you're in self
Yeah.
And I imagine we also might get the question of in Buddhism, we might have some Buddhists here who are like, well, what about no
No
self?
self, sure.
But yeah, like how do you know when I've talked to people who've been working the IFS model, what are some clues for you? I guess it's different for everyone, but that either you're in self or that you're more blended or merged with a part.
Yeah, great. So we made it easy by naming the qualities of self or self energy, all with words that start with a C. So calm, curious, compassionate, I wrote them down, courageous, creative, connected, clarity, confidence. So these are just pointers to help you identify a quality of presence. And the quality of presence is open-hearted. Um, there's wisdom. There's a resource that's accessible. There's not a huge agenda. There's like a spacious presence. You might call it a mindful state. The difference in terms of how we use self energy in IFS is it's not just a passive witness. It's actually an active internal leader, and it's also the healing agent. So we use self to connect with parts, the other kinds of parts that there are. So protective parts and vulnerable parts. The IFS model is meant to create a linkage between self and either a protective part or a vulnerable part. And the fundamental assumption is when self meets a part, healing can happen, resourcing can happen. And so we're always trying to, we have certain diagnostic questions that we use to help identify whether a person has enough self energy that's present. And then once we sense that there's enough, we help them create a relationship. So creating internal relationships is like a primary function of what we're doing in IFS therapy.
I got a bit of a curveball question,
Sure.
which is how do you know? And I'm thinking this, I'm in California, and there's a lot of, when you talked about the qualities,
Yeah,
I was like, there's also a lot of performative qualities. I feel this in me, like, okay, I'm so calm, I'm
sure,
compassionate. So how would you know the difference between like self sounds great, but how do you know whether it's somewhat performative or
sure.
it's actually real?
Sure. There's a couple ways. I love that question, actually. So performative self energy, we have a term that we use, which is a self-like part. So it's a part that seems like it's spacious and open, but there might be a bit of an agenda, like in this case, to seem open or to seem enlightened. But it turns out the model has like a self-correcting function in it. So if we try to bring what you're describing as a self-like part into connection with, an anxious part, it won't be resourcing, or the limits of the resourcing won't go that deep. So we'll start to sense that, and then we'll ask, is there a part of you that's um, kind of open but has a little bit of an agenda to fix or change this part that we're trying to get to know? So the presence of an agenda, that's another tip off. So we have diagnostic questions that we ask. I'll just give you one. How do you feel towards that part X, like a anxious part, let's say, or a sad part? The client will, or the student will respond with they feel scared or they feel judgmental or they feel angry. That tells us, oh, what's in the driver's seat, what's answering that question is likely a part. Or they might say, I feel curious or I feel compassionate. And then that tells us, oh, there's some self energy there. And so when we hear that answer, that's when we start to build the self to part relationship, which is innately healing.
It's awesome. I mean, I have a dozen more questions because I know there's so many parts of the model. Do you think this is a good time? Should we practice a little bit? Would this be a
Sure.
good time to? We were debating this and prepping. We're like, how much do we? Because the model feels so complicated. There's so many layers to it, but we wanted to also give you all a sense of it. So Govinda has a practice. I have a practice. So let me jump in with my practice then. Govinda, thanks for starting to sketch it out. It's a big piece. So I want to do this practice that many of you will know if you've done work with me around the hand and the fist. For some of you, I apologize if this is like the 10th time that you've done this, but it's just so useful in terms of conveying a core principle of trauma informed practice. And from when Govinda and I were talking, I think it actually relates. It is a bridge into the IFS work. So we're going to do this together, especially if you haven't done it before. So it's going to be probably a 3-minute practice. Just invite you to take a moment and center. You could have your eyes open or closed. And just taking a beat here to notice what's happening right now. How is this content impacting you so far? Right, almost like a baseline for you as we begin here. And then this practice is meant to convey what a trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive embodiment would feel like. Govinda's already spoken to some of this. It's going to involve working with our hands, but you could also visualize the practice. I'm going to have them in the screen, but you can have them in your lap, okay? So for the first part of the practice, you're going to close one of your hands, make it into a fist. Again, I'll have it up here, but you can have it in your lap. Imagine that the job of this fist is to stay closed. And in staying closed, this is taking care of your safety and your survival. Okay, closed fist, taking care of your safety. Then, as an experiment with the other hand, try to open the fist. Give yourself that experience for a moment. Notice what happens to the fist, what happens to the breath, any narratives that are here. Okay, great. You can let that go. You can shake it out if you want. Okay, part 2, same thing. Closed fist, taking care of your safety and survival. Then into the other hand, bring a quality of compassion and curiosity and calm, some respect into this hand. Compassion, curiosity, calm, respect. And then whenever you're ready, place that hand underneath the closed fist. And it's like you're communicating something like, good job. It's like, of course you're closed. Of course you're closed. You're taking care of safety. And you're just there with presence, listening. And same as before, you're just noticing what happens to the fist, what happens to the breath. Is this the same or different than the first round? Great. And then you can let that go and just take a moment if you want to notice again if there's a difference. Notice how you are after the practice. And then we'll return back here. Great. Thanks everyone. We'll have more time for Q&A. Just want to invite if anyone wants to share into the chat just how that was for you, what came up. Specifically, again, if this is newer for you, especially ways that this relates to learning around your own practice, your own, if you're teaching, holding others. We could ripple out into a lot of questions here, but let's tie this into IFS here. So Govinda, you've seen me do that practice before. Can you talk about that practice through the IFS lens, like through everything that you just opened for us earlier? How would you talk about what's happening there? Because I think of this as a really strong trauma-informed embodiment, but what would IFS say?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a great exercise, and I think the application of IFS is, yeah, just a really clear. It's a clear example of a part, in this case, the fist, that we're trying to get to know, we're trying to be in relationship with. Um, in the first example, the way I would frame it is there's a part with an agenda that's like, I want to change you, I want to fix you, I want you to be different. Um, there's an agenda. And so there's some other part that's engaging with the thing I'm trying to get to know. And the response of the fist is usually it resists, it doesn't soften, it doesn't open. So that just shows you what happens when a part is trying to get to know another part. It usually doesn't go all that great. It happens all the time inside of us naturally, though. We often have parts that don't like each other. And so what we need is to bring that quality of self, which is that hand that you showed being calm, being curious, being compassionate, giving validation to, of course, that's where you are.
Mhm.
And for me, that I just felt like a softening of this hand. Both hands just felt soft and supple in that example. And so the open hand is a perfect example of self or self energy. So when those qualities are present, parts can feel it and then they respond well. So, but as practitioners or teachers, coaches, therapists, we don't always have this available. Sometimes we're triggered. Sometimes we have a part that has an agenda or who gets annoyed by something that's coming up in one of our students or our clients. And so we do have a part that's has some kind of agenda and our clients can feel it. So the question is, so what do you do? How do you actually find that quality of presence that feels calm and curious and compassionate? And so we have some techniques and some practices that we do. And yeah, so I can actually lead you through an experience of that if this would be a good time for that.
Let's do it. I just want to ask before you do it,
Yeah,
how do you, when you're when you're in your practice, do you just, is it like you notice, you're like, oh, I'm more, I have an agenda, I'm in a part, I'm not
yeah,
act. Do you, what do you do in those
yeah.
moments when you're in a session?
It's, well, I mean, first is just becoming aware of it. So I just
Right,
have
right.
traversed my inner world enough that I get that when my breath gets a little stoppy or I feel some tension in my chest. So just knowing some of the cues,
Can I
physical
jump
cues.
in? Can I just say
Yeah,
this is where I get so excited about mindfulness and IFS is the fact that you were aware enough in that moment to actually notice that your breath got a little tight. Like I get so excited about the potential, the
yeah,
overlap there. So sorry to
yeah.
interrupt, but yeah.
No, no problem. That's great. Um, and then how do I work with myself? It's different in session. Uh, I'm engaging with with my clients in my case. Um, so I can breathe to the parts of me that I'm noticing. I can acknowledge them internally. But I can also say, just open up some space for me to be here. And then maybe after the session, I can spend some more time being with the part that got activated. So, but awareness is the first step, just knowing what happens in my own inner world when a part starts to come up. So,
Mhm.
and that's what this practice will help your practitioners have an experience of for themselves.
Great. You want to do it? You want to lead us?
Yeah. So let me just tell you about what we're going to do so you know if it feels right for you to do. Um, I'm going to have you imagine a student or a client, could be a real one. You don't have to pick the hardest one you've ever had, but someone who triggers you a little bit, someone who with whom you might feel some annoyance come up, um, some judgment, any kind of reaction that doesn't feel like you're staying open and resourced. So you're going to get mildly triggered here if you're willing to, but then I'm going to help you work with it a little bit and see if you can get a little bit of space and come back to some self energy. So that feels okay to you. Why don't you go ahead and close your eyes? That feels right. And first, just notice your breath and your body. Just notice the quality of presence that's here now. And then I want you to imagine that person, that student, that client, that parts of you have some kind of reaction to. Just kind of see them in your mind's eye. And then see them or hear them doing that thing or saying that thing that activates parts of you. And now shift your awareness back to yourself, back to your body and your breath. And just notice what's happening inside now. Maybe scan for tension. You might notice a point of view or a narrative start to come up. Annoyance or judgment potentially, fear. And track what's happening in your body and your breath as you're hearing that. And then ask yourself, how do I feel towards them right now? How do I feel towards that person? And just kind of make a mental note of that. And so what's likely happening is there's some part that's just reacting inside of you to them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just work with that part a little bit. So I want you to just focus on it and just notice where that part shows up, how that part shows up in or around your body. And just see if you can bring some curiosity, some warmth, or some care to this part of you. Let it know we just want to understand it a little better. Just want to get to know it, not make it wrong. And if you can find some natural curiosity, just ask this part, what's its role inside of you? What's its job? And just let the answer come from the inside. Try not to just think it. And see if there's more that this part might want you to know about itself. Some of you might see images. Some of you might hear a point of view. Some of you might just feel sensations. All those channels are okay. And it could be something else or not even much happening. And then just see if you can acknowledge this part. Just show it that you get it. Maybe even extend some care to it if that's natural enough. And then ask it, would it be willing to open up some space for you to be the one to be in relationship with that student or that client? See if it can trust you for the next minute or so. So we're going to turn back towards that triggering person or client. So could it just soften back and let you be there? And some will and some won't, and either way is okay. But now go ahead and bring that person back up into your mind's eye, that challenging person. Have them do or say that thing again that they do or say that's challenging. And then see what happens inside of you now, and your body, your breath. And notice, how do you feel towards them now? Maybe different, it may be the same, but how do you feel towards them after possibly getting a little distance from that part that reacts? So I'll be curious to hear how that went. And for now, just thank that part of you that showed up for sharing and showing you whatever it did or didn't. And when you're ready, you can slowly come back out.
Great. Thanks, Govinda. Govinda, can we open it up? I feel like this would be a great time. Great. So thanks for leading that. There's a Diana here in the chat. Seemed to like the practice. I'm wondering, we don't have a lot. There was some earlier questions in the chat, but I think it'd be great just to open it up. Is anyone willing? We're going to open up here just for general questions about everything we've covered here, and then we'll close. I think let's do hand raising. Let's do electronic hand raising. So if you have comments, questions, please jump in. We probably won't have time for everyone, but yeah, Sandra. Okay, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Sandra, come on and let's
Thank,
just chat it out for a bit. What you got?
thank
How'd it
you.
go? Oh, and if we can lead, I don't know if it's possible. We can lead with like what happened for you in the practice. I think that'd be great just to hear.
So I love both of the practices. I just finished a couple months ago my level 2 training in IFS, and I was thrilled to see you doing this. Um, the thing I wanted to ask, Govinda, you may or may not have this an answer for this yet, but how would you talk to those of us who are coaches? So I'm an ICF credential coach. I happen to be one of the folks who are grandfathered in, so I can become certified, but there are many people who are not therapists and still want to engage with IFS. And so what suggestions might you have for them? And if you do a class in the Bay Area, I'd love to be your PA. Yeah,
Thanks.
I'd be happy to be your PA. The last practice reminded me of something that Fatima Finney does when she's teaching. She has us put our hand on our face and to bring it back so we can see it. So we can't see our hand when it's like this, but the separation. And so that's what I felt like walking through the practice with you, Govinda. So thank you. And thank you, David. I've missed you.
No, thanks.
Yeah, so there has been a change in the IFS community from the IFS Institute over the years. They were training coaches and lots of different kinds of practitioners with the full scope of the model. And people were practicing the model with basically without being licensed therapists. And my understanding is in about the last year, they've decided to kind of limit the scope of what their their trainings kind of give in terms of working with really vulnerable parts, with what some people call the inner child. So we call them exiles in IFS. So my understanding is that licensed therapists can work obviously very safely, and it's a big part of what we do with these young vulnerable parts, and that coaches, because it's being brought into executive coaching right now, it's being brought into schools, that they're not given like the free rein to work with exiles quite as readily as a licensed therapist is. So you basically have to work within the scope of your practice and the scope of your competence with the, in the state laws of the state that you reside in. But the IFS Institute is changing the trainings so that coaches are given kind of a particular approach to the model that doesn't always go to exiles, and then psychotherapists are kind of given the full model.
I'm going to mention it just briefly here that Govinda and I, in prepping for this, we decided we kept trying to pack a lot in. We're going to do a course, but you have no pressure. We're going to mention it at the end, but we don't want to like hook you in, like now you're going to do a big training. So for those of you that are interested in wanting to do, because we've been talking about what is the boundaries, trauma sensitive mindfulness, that's a huge part of the practice. How deep can you go, and where would IFS be useful and not? So, and then there's all these different labels for parts. And so anyway, if you want to go deeper, we're going to talk about it, but that's great. Sandra, anything else you want to say here? Okay, thank you. Let's go. I see Shoshan, I can ask you to unmute. Come on.
Hi, welcome back, David, and welcome, Govinda. This is incredibly useful. And in each of the two exercises, because of the exercise format, I was able to step back and be in myself. So I'm a Soto Zen priest with over 50 years of experience, and I regularly give practice discussion and try to relate to people the way my Dharma grandfather did, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, which is to see Buddha in each person and relate directly to Buddha. And as part of my responsibility, I try to always work with one or two people who other teachers don't really want to work with because they're annoying or painful to work with. So I want to ask a question that's related to Sandra's question, related to your answer to Sandra's question, each of your answers. So at what point does a spiritual advisor well-trained in mindfulness become a danger to their traumatic patients in personal interviews? What, like between now and the course you offer, what specific safety advice do you recommend, just in a kind of down and dirty way?
Sure. I mean, I think the clearest answer is when you're outside of your scope of competence. If you know the model inside out and you have a lot of experience working with it, that, I mean, you're going to be able to help most people. So a little bit of information can be harmful. I forget where that saying comes from, but we're not going to teach people in this training to actually like do psychotherapy or do what we call unburdenings, which is like a real thorough process for working with vulnerable parts. So that is really the domain of psychotherapists. So you all have your own experiences and trainings. So I would just say you need to revert to what you feel the most skillful in, certainly working within the laws of your state regulations.
I wouldn't add much, except this is really the whole point of the TSM work, is to not double down in a moment. If you don't know where a trauma process is going and you know the trauma is present, that's really what I've been trying to speak to for years, is don't just become cavalier in that moment. Clearly, Shoshan, from what you just said, you're not being, but I think that's the boundary, is not to just keep going deeper. So yeah, you want to follow up, and then we'll move on.
Yes. The origin of my question is that often spiritually trained counselors don't have the training to know what we don't know.
Right. That's right.
For sure.
I just want to say the field has changed so much. Even just you being here, it's been so powerful to see trauma informed work. that more is not always better when it comes to meditation around trauma. So, but I agree, you don't know what you don't know. So thanks for your work. It's great to see you. I think we'll have time for one or two more. So we'll go Sarah and then Arena. And let's come on here. Sarah, there you go.
Great. Hey guys, thanks for hosting this. I visualized the last person who sold me my car, and man, I just salesmen, and women, I suppose. There's just there's such a part, and so I kind of broadened it even to salespeople because I immediately go from a trauma responsive facilitator to a total asshole in the presence of salespeople. So that was a helpful practice. And what was interesting to me, his name is Brian. Apparently, that part that guy asked who, could anything you want me to know about you. This part's name is Brian. And when I asked who is he protecting me from, he said yourself. And then, can you trust me to be in a relationship with this person? No, immediately he said no, because you'll make rash decisions, or you'll, like I have this cart before the horse part maybe as well. So my question is, that was curious to me. If Brian, and I have therapy later where I'm mapping my part, so this is kind of cool. I'll bring it in. But if Brian's if defensiveness is to protect me from myself, what do you make of that, Govinda? And
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm in my defensive, my flip lid space, that's when I'm making rash decisions, or it's actually getting in the way. And I know there's something around protector and exile and zippity doo dah. So I'll just plant that there.
Great example. And you alluded to it, that the part that Brian, was it Brian that was the part? I forget the name
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Yeah,
That
Brian.
part this is the systems part of internal family systems. What it's concerned about is that there's going to be this rash decisions part that's going to take over. And I imagine maybe that's happened before, that like, you've made
Mm-hmm.
rash decisions and that part has sort of taken the lead in some kind of decision-making process. And so Brian is polarized. We use the word polarized to say it's like in opposition to this other part. So in IFS, either one of those would lead to some kind of deepening and understanding of why those parts do the things that they do. So, but this is really common. It's a great example of how one part doesn't just do something because it's fun to be, skeptical or resistant. It does it because it's worried about some other part taking over.
Fascinating.
So,
Thanks.
and if you work that, does it eventually kind of untangle? If you
Yeah,
keep,
exactly.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, really, like the simplest way to do it is just to listen to both sides without them. Usually, what happens inside is these parts just go back and forth. Well, no, we do need to make a decision. Oh, no, but they're gonna rip us off. And that you actually, so bringing the quality of self energy into relationship with just one of them, hearing what they're really about and what they're trying to take care of inside, and doing that really thoroughly with both sides will soften the tension between them.
Great. Thanks,
Great.
Sarah.
Thanks.
I want to answer all these questions, but we're going to have time for one more. So, Raina, please bring us home, and then we'll close here.
Okay, hi. So I am a mental health therapist. I was a life coach on television, and I am the head of mindfulness at a dual diagnosis facility. And so you and I talked, David, before I met you at the Mindfulness Summit at Omega Institute. And I signed up to do your TSM training, and then I dragged my mom into it too. So
That's awesome.
it's it's just been very interesting for me. And actually, this week is the week that I do the mindfulness training with the new employees at the facility.
Mhm.
And doing this practice, the hand one, of course, I think I've done it with you before, but this time it really it resonated with me more.
Great.
The other piece is I have a friend who's an IFS psychologist, and so she actually introduced me to IFS therapy. And so I've been exploring it for a while, trying to find someone just for myself because I want to do some more healing work for myself. And
Mhm.
so when I saw this, I said, let me jump on. And so when Govinda just led us through, what came up for me was I see you, I hear you, I respect you. So that was the refrain that kept coming up over and over again. And then it took me back to when I was 4 years old. And I was like, well, I wasn't seeing heard or respected when I was 4. So it was very interesting. And what I'll say is that's something I'll still, I'm sure, go back and forth with. But the overall message that I got was that I see myself, I hear myself, and I respect myself. Yes.
Beautiful.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Beautiful.
Thanks for being here. All right. Well, that seems like a great place to end. For folks, actually, we'll stay on a couple extra minutes for folks. I see Diana, Bonnie. If folks can go over the hour, I want to try to answer a couple more questions. But we're going to end here with that's the formal content we wanted to deliver. Govinda, thank you. Really, really appreciate you being here. And we didn't know we're like 30 people going to show up, and so thanks everyone for being here. I mentioned it that so we're going to close here. Thank you. We're going to mention this training, but please don't feel like you have to stay right now. But in case you're interested, we're going to just tell it to you in 2 minutes. Govinda and I decided when we were prepping, we're like, there's just so much to this. Let's do it. So we're going to do a live training in January. I'm going to put it into the chat. Here's the reg. Well, now it's going to fly up the chat. You'll get an email about this, but basically we're going to do a 4-session live course of just taking deep dives into all the different parts. There's so many different pieces to this that we didn't get to cover today. So let me just show you real quick. Again, you'll get an email for this, but we're pretty excited about it. So here it is. Let me share my screen. All right, this is what it looks like. I'm so proud of this. I made this. I'm very with this wheel. I'm happy. So it's 4-part live training. Here's what we're just going to get up to. So we're going to talk about introing it again, talking about parts, but then we're also going to get into protectors, unblending. We'll talk more about self. And then we're going to work with exiles and integration. And really, this is ideally to have you feel empowered in your own practice and work. Like I found this so powerful as a trauma sensitive teacher that if I know this map, that I'm more effective. And that's the idea. It's not to train you to be a trauma therapist as much as actually let's take a deep dive into IFS. It's hard to get into IFS trainings right now. There's a couple questions about this. So we're going to do a TSM IFS frame. And we have a guest session. Dick Schwartz got on board with this, the founder. I did an interview with him. It was awesome. I love this conversation. So it's pre-recorded. If you register, you'll get access to it. But Dick is actually the person that was asking us to like take this out to people and please let them know the principles. Let's go deep around it because they're getting a log jam around IFS because it's so popular. So there's a session, you'll get access to it. And then I also did a session on AI because I feel like what is this moment around AI and trauma-informed practice? And I've met some people who are actually doing IFS for AI. It was wild. So we had a whole session. Anyway, these are available. So here's what we got. If you're interested, we're going to do an early bird. It's $397, but you get $100 off. Sorry, neither of us are super salesy, but we want to let you know about it. So we'll get an email. You'll use this code if you want to get in the next couple of weeks. You'll get 4 sessions. You get the bonus sessions, and you'll have lifetime access to everything. So we're really excited. We're going to do this in January. We want to go super deep. And we wanted to do this today as a way to just like serve the community and have you all here. So thanks for being here. So we'll close here formally. Thank you, everyone. Just really good to see you and be with you. And Govinda, can you stay an extra couple minutes if people have some additional questions? Great. So we're going to hang out here for a minute, but thanks everyone. Have a great day.